Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Let's continue with the VBA to SQL Server Automation mini series. And today we're going to create dynamic filters in the SQL where clause by reading criteria and values from an Excel worksheet. Now, later in the series, I'll probably show how to build an entire user form where users will be able to pick values from dropdowns, set values in a text box, and whatever. But sometimes you may just want to create a quick and simple solution where your colleagues can change filter values directly in Excel sheet without any coding whatsoever. And those changes will dynamically update the SQL query behind the scenes. And I think this approach is perfect, especially if you're having colleagues who aren't very comfortable with SQL, but they still need to access data from databases. And thus you can give them a quick and working solution without spending hours building complex stuff. So once again, I'm going to use the AdventureWorks database and the product table in particular. And let's say that I'd like to create a SQL query that filters these columns with this criteria and these values. So let's go back to SSMS, and this is the entire table from production.product. It has 504 records. However, now I'm about to start filtering it. So the first filter criteria was that the cell start date should be later than, obviously later than or equal to 1st of January 2012. So where cell start date is greater than or equal to, when we filter by dates, we need the date must be in double quotes. So here, this is 2012, 1st of January. If I click F5, then we have already filtered out nearly 300 rows. And then the next condition is that the standard cost is greater than or equal to 250. And then the next one is that the name should include frame. Now let's quickly write these two. So first, the standard cost greater than or equal to 250. Apparently here we don't need quotes since this is a number column. And then for the name column, we want it to include the word frame. So name like, and in quotes and in percentage symbols, we can write frame here. And we already are left with only 17 rows. And we have more filtration to do. So the weight column shouldn't be empty. So this is weight is not null. And then finally, the color will be one of these three. And color is in black, red, blue. Okay, it's blue red, but it doesn't matter. If I click F5, and now we only have 8 rows. So the idea is to create a procedure that allows the user to alter these values and apparently add more conditions here. And it should dynamically create all these end conditions. And apparently we will want to run this directly in Excel. So whoever is running this doesn't even have to log into SSMS. And we're gonna do this in VBA, but before we head over to the Visual Basic Editor, there is one trick here that I guess many SQL users are familiar with. Anytime you have multiple end conditions, it's a common practice that in the where clause you will have 1 equals 1. So this always returns true apparently. And then the individual criteria and conditions will be on new lines, and they will all have this, they will all start with and, of course. So that's what we're going to write now in VBA. And back to Excel, and I'm gonna launch the Visual Basic Editor and start writing a subroutine, which I will call build dynamic where clause. And I would like to set this worksheet as an object variable, so I will call it count conditions worksheet as worksheet, and then set condition worksheet equals this workbook dot worksheets conditions. Apparently I will have to loop through each row in order to create the string. That means that I'll have to find the last row, so one more variable and another one for the loop, and the last row will be count worksheet.cells rows.count, comma 1 and excel up.row. And now I can write for I equals 2 to last row, next I. Now I need a few more variables because I'd like to store the field, the criteria and value in variables. I think it's going to be more understandable. So field as string, criteria as string, and I mean the cells have value property that I'm using a lot, so I'm not gonna call this value. I will simply call it val as string. Actually, this shouldn't be string because here we have date and here we have a number. So this should be variant, which practically means anything. And this is the default VBA data type. So now here in the loop, field will be count worksheet cells on row I, comma 1 dot value. And that's what I meant a second ago when I said that I don't want to call this variable value. And then criteria equals count worksheet.cells on row I and column 2 dot value, and dot val equals count dot worksheet cells on row I, comma 3 dot value. Now these are hard coded, and I have another video where I show a user-defined function that returns the number of a column by its header. So if you're interested in this, I'm going to link it in the description. I'll apparently need more variables here. One for the SQL query. It's going to be string. And another one which I will call simply temp a string. And here I can start building the SQL query, and I'm going to write select star from, and apparently in a real world project I will refrain from getting all the columns from a table, especially from a table like that has like multiple columns. So maybe it makes sense to just get the columns that we need. However, this is pretty much what we did in the previous video, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. But now I want to continue this SQL string on a new line. And just like we did in the previous video, I'm gonna use the Visual Basic character returns and line feed constant. And then here SQL equals SQL and from production dot product, and again concatenating this with VBCRLF. And as I mentioned, the next thing in the query will be where 1 equals 1. So SQL where 1 equals 1 and VBCRLF. And just to check what's going on, maybe here we're gonna print the query. And if I click run, now we can see that we have pretty much created the query until here. So this is like the constant part, and now we need to create the dynamic part. So back to Excel, and here we have started the loop, and apparently we're gonna loop through each row, and depending on what it says here in the criteria column and the value, we'll have to construct the string with string concatenation. And obviously, since we have different criterias, now I'm going to write an if-then statement, but in a real-world project, maybe it makes a lot more sense to use a mapping table, because this if-then statement will probably become too long. But that's what I'm gonna do now. And I'll write here if criteria equals, let's start with the first one, later than, then, and if. And here, this is where I'm gonna use this temp variable here that I created. Temp equals field, and we practically have to create the string cell start date. This should be greater than or equal to. And if I go back to SSMS, we need single quotes, the date, and to close the single quote. And one important factor here is also the format of the date, because here this is the Excel format, and in SSMS it's a little bit different, and I don't want to risk any bug with this. So here I'm going to use the format function, and I'm going to format the value which stored in the val variable, and the format will be yyyy-mm-dd. And to this, I will have to add single quotes to the left and to the right of this date. So here, I'm gonna add one single quote and another one at the end. Now, outside this if statement, I will write SQL equals SQL and temp and VBCRLF. So for each this row, we will have to continue the SQL variable by adding and here we have a space, whatever we have stored here in the temp variable, and we will ensure that on the next iteration we will have a new line. So let's click run now and see how the query looks for now. Okay, we have select star from table where 1 equals 1. The format here looks good. I'm not sure why this appears 4 more times. Oh yeah, I am sure why it appears 4 more times. Anytime we enter this loop, the temp variable must be empty. So here, I will make it an empty string. And let's see now, if I click run, now this looks better now, because that's exactly what we wanted. We have here the field name, the operator for it, and the value. And that's what I meant when I said that maybe in a real world project, it makes sense to use a mapping table, because you can, instead of writing so many if conditions that I'm going to do now, then you can simply maybe use a lookup and say, okay, it's later than, this directly maps to this symbol. So you don't need to hard code it here. But anyway, now we'll have to continue with a bunch of less than with a bunch of if else if statements. And I don't have here before then, but apparently if I had, then maybe I can just copy this and change it to else if. And let's say if I have before done, then the only thing which will be different will be this sign. And maybe in this case, I would want to make it explicitly before, right? Okay, we'll continue then when the next is greater than or equal to. So I will copy these two lines and paste them here. And if it says greater than or equal to, then we no longer need this format function, and we don't even need single quotes. We practically will have the field, the operator, and since it's number, we don't need those single quotes. So here, I will change this to greater than or equal to, and I can directly concatenate this with the val variable. And once again, we don't have here less than or equal to, but I will copy paste it because maybe we will test it in the end. So if I had less than or equal to, then the only thing which will be different is this. And if I click run now, and let's first clear the immediate window. Now it looks good. Standard costs greater than or equal to 250, exactly how it appears here in the query. Now the next one will be a little bit trickier because we have the field name, then we have like operator, and we need to construct the string by using single quotes and percentage signs, both in the beginning and in the end. So let's do this. I'm gonna copy this to these two lines and paste them here. And if the criteria equals includes, then we will have that temp equals, and here I'm gonna write like, and I'm gonna leave a space after like. And actually I can, no, let's do it separately. I'm gonna write here the starting quote and the percentage sign, close the double quotes and concatenate this with val. And in the end, we'll have percentage sign and single quote. There's this one more time. Name like, okay, yeah, I missed the space in the beginning. And click run. Okay, name like, and I think it's exactly what we need here. Yep. Then the next one should be relatively simple. We need to ensure that this field is not empty. So this should be not empty. And we need to concatenate this with the string is not null. Like I said, this is probably the easiest part. And if I click run, yeah, that looks good. And then finally, we need to create the multi-value string. Now, this is the most difficult part because for the field, we have the in operator. We will have to enclose this in parentheses. And what's even more difficult is that we will have to enclose any of those values in quotes, and we need to take into an account that in this case there are 3 values, but potentially it could be just 1 value. So we're not guaranteed that there will be spaces here, that there will be comma and a space. So what I'm going to do is we'll have to split the string, and then we'll have to loop through each item and add quotes to it, and in the end we will have to join the string back. And apparently these are too many operations to simply write them here in one else if statement. Therefore, I'm gonna do this in a separate function. So if this is one off, I'm gonna leave this blank for now because I'm about to start writing a user-defined function, which I will call. I'm not sure how to call it. Maybe prepare multi-value string. Uh, Again, not the best name for a function, but and apparently the function will have one argument, which I will call val, and it's gonna be a string. Actually, I will make it a variant, because when I call this function, since this is a variant, and if this is a string, then VBA will return type mismatch error, and that's not what I want. So now I'm gonna create a variable here, values, as variant, because when we use the split function now, we're gonna split this by comma and a space, and it's going to return an array, and array cannot be simply passed as data type string. So values equals split function, and we're gonna split the val variable, and we're gonna split it by comma and a space. As mentioned, this will return an array, in this case of 3 items. And if I declare a variable I as integer, now I can loop through that array by writing for I equals from the lower bound of values to the upper bound of values. Next I, and I need to write that values of I equals single quote and values of I and single quote. So that's it, and in the end I will have to join those 3 in this case items back, because currently it will have added single quotes, but in the end I will have to write that this equals join, the source array will be values, and the delimiter will be comma and a space. And if I test this function directly in the immediate window, since I have selected the cell, I can directly refer here to it as a selection. And as we can see, it returns exactly what I wanted, because each of these 3 values has single quotes, is wrapped in single quotes, and the values are separated by a comma. We don't even need the space, so we can get rid of it, but it doesn't matter. And just to show you that it's going to work also if we pass a single value, let's say I'm gonna pass here just black and click enter, it still works. So even if we pass a string that doesn't contain comma and a space, it still works. So now we need to create, we have created this part of the string, but we also need the in keyword and the parentheses. So back here in this long if statement, then if the criteria is not 1 but 1 off, then temp equals field and in, and I'm gonna add here the starring parentheses, and now we're gonna call our function prepare multi-value string by passing the val variable, and we need to close the parentheses. So after writing code this, then let's see if I click run now, what's going to happen. All right, I have once again forgotten here the space before the in. So if I click run again, select star from production.product, the query looks okay as syntax. And if I copy paste it and if I manually paste it in SSMS and try to run it, I don't see any syntax error here. So I believe the query is good. And it returns those 8 rows. And now we can finally try to call it from the Visual Basic Editor. And for this, we're gonna use this query that we started the series with. So I want the result of that query to appear in the result worksheet. So here, actually, I'm gonna do it in this same subroutine. So I'm gonna call the run SQL query subroutine. The worksheet name will be result, and the SQL will be the SQL variable. And if I click run and go to this worksheet, then we can see that we have these exact 8 rows. And if I change this to, let's say, from 250, let's say I change it to 10, and I add here also silver. And if I click run now we can see that we have a lot more rows. So it works dynamically because, yeah, these are the silver items, the rows with the silver item, and somewhere here for the cost column. Maybe they are not so cheap items because in the end of the day, the AdventureWorks database is for some bicycle shop or something like that. So maybe those are the cheapest items, especially when we are talking about frames. Yeah. So this is, I'm not gonna say a very easy, but a workable solution if you want to give your colleagues the chance to run dynamic SQL queries from Excel without even logging into SSMS. So, unusually long video today. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments, or if you have suggestions for future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.